it looks like somebody is actually using the power switch in front of the server to turn it off while we're active and working.
Yeah.
And
Hugo,
yeah,
wait. Does this story involve a video camera?
yes, it does.
This is the story, Alex.
What?
This is the story I wanted to tell that I heard, and I wanted to name this episode. If we use this story, I wanted to name the episode End Job Abnormal. Hugo, please keep telling this story. I can't believe that you know this story. Oh, this is awesome.
Okay.
Welcome to You, Me, and IBM.
So, Kurt, I know you've got an interest in IBM history and IBM AS400 history in particular. So I found this morning's meeting very interesting, that there's going to be some renovations to the local history center that will involve IBM. Are you thinking about getting in on that effort? Because I know you've got materials that could be put to good use in a historical center.
You know, that's true. I do. And actually, before this podcast, I just went over and dropped off a large box of 8x10 glossy photos of old pictures of IBM and the products and the people that used to work here to one of the site coordinator people. So, yeah, it'll be nice if I can be a small part of that effort. That'd be nice. I don't think they need me. But it is nice. There's a lot of artifacts that are around here from the rich history we've had.
Half of them on your desk.
Half of them on my desk or in areas I kind of co-manage.
And if I'd known you were going to give those away, I would have had a closer look at those photographs. But I guess I lost my chance.
We can go get them off her desk. Actually, I thought I had one. No, I thought I had one in here, but there was a picture. I thought it kind of looked like someone who used to work in account advocate. So I kept that up for her, and I'll probably go back and grab a couple that I liked. I took a couple.
All right.
But, that you bring up a good point. IBM Rochester and the IBM Global Support Center does have a rich history. And I think it's kind of interesting, could be interesting to customers to learn more about that history. Maybe we can have an episode where we specifically talk about some of that history sometime. But
Yeah,
I think some of the best, but I think some of the best history, though, is the people that work here. You and I have worked here for a long time. Some of the people we work with and look up to, they worked here for a long time. And today our guest, Hugo Castillo, has also worked here for a long time. But I don't think I've ever met Hugo. Hugo, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Hey, Hugo, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How long have you been working for IBM?
This is my second tour with IBM here.
It is.
Oh,
Yeah, and this time around it's since 2006, so it's about 17 years, 18 years I think it's going to be this year. Um, and my first round with IBM was about 10 years. I took
Okay.
about a year and a half, 2 years that I ended up working with a business partner.
Okay.
And then I came back. So, most of my life has been working with IBM.
So when did you start at IBM? And because you don't live in Minnesota, have you ever lived in Minnesota?
I did get married in Minnesota and went to school in Minnesota.
Oh, you did?
I did up in the Twin Cities, and I did. That's where I, got my first job, and finished school, got married in Minnesota. I have two kids that were born in Minnesota. Um, so we lived there for about 10 years, 12 years maybe.
Was that during your first stint at IBM that you lived
No,
in
that was
Rochester,
before
in
that.
Minnesota?
That
Okay.
was before that. But it was my first job while still in college. I was hired to replace the System 36.
Now, what does that mean? When you say you're hired to replace System 36, what does that mean?
The college that I was still going at, and I was working for the computer lab. or labs. They, I started as a intern, I guess, and then they hired me to do their IT out there. And
Sure.
they used to teach the Office products in the System 36. I don't know if you guys remember that.
A little bit, yeah. That's some old stuff.
And the idea was to replace that System 36 with, a local area network. And we put, Office. I don't know if it was Office. I think it was Work Perfect, if you guys remember
Okay.
that,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and Lotus. And so that was my first job. And for all of it, I shared my office with the System 36. It was really loud, but yeah,
I was going to say,
and
how's your hearing these days?
yeah, exactly. So yeah, it was interesting enough. That's what, ironically, I was starting to know IBM. It started with me trying to replace a system, which uh, they did. But
Yeah.
when we finished that, a place in St. Cloud, Minnesota, heard about um, my role in designing this local area network with the college, and they were
Sure.
interested, and they had the same idea. They wanted to take their office vision, and this time they ran on an AS400 back then. And the idea was again to create a local area network that had, that they could do email on it. So that was
Sure.
my second job, was in St. Cloud, Minnesota, to replace an not the AS400 itself, because they probably still use it. It's still a customer
Okay.
of ours as far as I know. But the idea was to take the Office part of it, the email out of it, and put it into a local
Oh,
area network.
sure.
Right.
Kind of modernize that
Yep.
so that people
Exactly.
use new tools.
Yep. And
Interesting.
that's where I finally got to meet the AS400 back then, and I kind of you know, um, I got in touch, got to use it, and of course, I really enjoyed working with it, and you could say I fell in love with it. So it got me in touch with the AS400. I got to know it. I worked there for about 2 years or so. Then the
Mhm.
drive was pretty bad.
From Minneapolis to St. Cloud.
This in cloud every day. Yeah,
Oh my God.
I know.
Yeah. That's Highway 94, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh.
And I got hired by another company. You guys probably heard of this one company. It used to be pretty big back in the 90s. It was called, and I think I can say it no longer exists. It was called Tidal Wave. It was like a big blockbuster that had, both music, and you can rent, take videos home and buy music.
Sure.
And they had this superstore concept. So it was like big stores that had everything in it. And they had lots of stores in the Twin Cities. I don't know if they ever had one in Rochester, but they definitely had some, 13, 14 stores up there. So it was pretty interesting. And their main system was an AS400, and that's when I got
Okay.
to finally be the administrator for it, not just the user hired to replace it, but the administrator. And that's when I got my experience with the AS400.
And did you
Um,
run into any work? Because you're on the work management team,
Correct.
and I imagine administrators are
Mhm.
oftentimes having to deal with work management issues. So
Yeah.
I guess that's what got you interested in work management.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the day-to-day operations that you do, right? They're part of what I do in work management nowadays, right? So creating users, securing the system, which is
All
important.
right, right.
And that's where it got me started. And in the system itself, as an operator, as an administrator. Um, but that's not why I ended up in work management, I guess, in this case. And here's where my life with IBM started. And it turns out that we as a family made a choice to go back to the country that I was born in, which is in Bolivia, South America.
Oh, Bolivia. Okay.
And when we worked after school, and we had two kids already, and we say, why don't you let's see if we can, if we can go down there and see how it goes for a little bit. And we did, and I got back down there, and after a few attempts or jobs, I got a call from the IBM general manager back then, which was a friend of an uncle of mine. He said, "Hey, I need somebody to do a systems engineer." That's what they were called back then, and it was our role that we do. But back then, as a system engineer, you get to go to clients. They called, and you just walked and took a taxi or whatever and drove to
Yeah.
their offices, and you did all the work on site
Yeah.
or in
An
their
SE. Yeah.
premises, right? Yeah, and it was for software too. We still have the hardware people that do that, but in back then it was software that we did. And the manager said, "Hey, my guy that was doing this quit, and this was Thursday, I think, and he says I need you on Monday. Can you do it?" I was like, "Sure. I just need to, I really wanted this job with IBM, and
And this is still in Bolivia, right?
this was in Bolivia, right?
Okay.
And so that was back in, I'm not even sure when, 94, I think. And so that's when my role with, my first 10 years with IBM started, with IBM Bolivia. And I started as a system engineer for the AS400. There was just one of us there. And of course, that's when I got to meet, second level support, and which was in Argentina, which is still, we still have some team members from there.
Well, hold on. Now, wait. Now, you just said something that's interesting.
Yeah,
You said you're a systems engineer, and there was just one of us there. Do you mean that there was one IBM systems engineer in Bolivia?
for the AS400. Yep. And
Wow.
I got to hire the second one as we were growing.
Was that the
Uh,
day after you started? Like, I need one more person so I can take a day off?
I think it was a while afterwards, but yeah, we didn't have that many customers. We still have a lot. I don't say lots, but we still have a presence in Bolivia
Yeah.
with AS400, IBMI now in our servers. So
So Hugo, what brought you back to the States?
yeah, so we always talked with my wife about coming back. We always had, in Bolivia we had two more kids, so there were a total of four at that point. And they were growing up, and we always wanted our kids to come to school here
Hmm.
and get back to where we were here before. So that's back in 2004 or 6, I think, is when we decided to come back, and that's
Okay.
when I got my job with IBM here at Rochester.
Hugo, did you and your wife meet in college?
No, we did not, and this is another story. My wife is from Honduras in
Okay.
Central America. And I met her while I was on vacation in Honduras for summer break. My dad worked for USAID. I think it's pretty in the news a lot lately.
It's a very good program.
Yeah, and he was living in Honduras, and I got to go visit him for the summer, and that's where I met my wife. And we married in Minnesota, um, out there, and so yeah, um,
Huh.
yeah, we've been all over the place. We picked up and moved ourselves many times.
I would think that would be challenging with kids. I mean,
Yeah,
how did your kids comment on it now? Like, why did we move around so much?
yeah. Of course, they never, when we decided to move back up here, um, they didn't want to come here at all. They was like, "I'm gonna
Huh.
lose all my friends, and you guys, don't like us anymore," and you know how that goes.
Oh,
And they never wanted to come back. And but after a while now, if we ask them, it's like they don't want to leave. It's like so yeah, it was kind of hard at first, but they got used to it, and
Yeah.
really like it here. And we I'm in the Cincinnati area now.
oh,
Um,
you are.
yeah, but I did go up there and worked at the support center for a while. And I did move. But yeah, back in 2007, I think I was up there for on the white buildings. I think that,
Oh,
Yeah,
right,
we were
right.
all there up then. Yeah.
yeah. So
So
uh,
since you've been in the support center working here, Have you been in the same area of work and management
Mhm.
kind of the whole time?
I have. I was hired, and I was hired for work management. I didn't know it back then, but when I was interviewing, they um, they were interviewing two positions, one's for advanced support and one's for work management.
Okay.
And I did end up on the work management area, which I really do enjoy it a lot. Back then I didn't know it, but it turns out that I got, for the position that I really wanted, which is work management and security.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Um,
If you were forced to choose any other queue to work in here in the IGSC,
yeah,
what would you choose, if
interesting.
any?
Well, you know that for a while they had us combined into the OS team, I think it was called, where we combined both Save Restore and work management, right? I think you guys remember that.
That's
Uh,
right.
yeah, so we got to learn everything from Save Restore to PRMS and tape and all that fun stuff that Kurt has to do nowadays. So
Yeah.
and I did enjoy that for a while. I don't think I remember much of it now, but it was fun. I would stick with work management if I had a choice.
Well, you're like an administrator. It's probably the closest to an administrator as you can
Hmm.
get here in the IGSC, I would guess.
Well, work management really touches so many areas
Hmm.
that I would think that over the years you would have ran into certain situations
Yeah.
and kind of interesting customer cases. I know for myself, I have some of my most memorable, interesting cases. Like I'll never forget customers that, sang to me
Hmm.
uh,
Oh,
about after their issue was resolved, and I kept their voicemail messages,
yeah.
and just silly things like that. Do you have any favorite or kind of most memorable cases you've had over the years?
Yeah, so I was thinking about it since you mentioned something. I did want to share a story that's a real life story, something that did happen to me. It wasn't at the support center here, but it did touch our developers in the support center.
Sure,
Um, and I think it highlights one of the things that we at work management and in security area we talk a lot about, and that's securing your system. Um, so I did want to share it. It started back to when I was that system engineer and visiting customers and talking to them. You get to talk to a lot of the customers because you're there and you're spending a lot of time with them, right?
yeah.
And it turns out that I'm really good at explaining technology.
Actually, I was talking to Tina a little bit earlier today
Uh,
about things, and I said, "Is there anything that I might think to ask Hugo about?" And that was what she said. She
mhm,
said, "Actually, Hugo trains a lot of the new people on our team
mhm,
in security and how to use these things and make sure things are working properly." And she said everyone always reports that the way he educates the rest of the team about how to handle cases and
okay.
do work is just top notch. So
Oh,
that's
really?
it's you saying that. It's interesting that that's the one thing she mentioned is how good you are about training other
Well,
people.
it turns out that because of the way I explain technology to people, I got, as a software engineer, I got some of the bigger sales back in those days with the IBM customers. One day I was talking to them to a customer, and their printer was kind of slow, and I said, "Well, you know what? IBM makes really nice big printer, industrial printers, and you should, look into it." And she's like, "What? You guys do printers and industrials?" And it's like, it was a big financial customer, and they say, "Well, let's look into it." And I
Yeah,
went back to IBM. I said, "These guys are interested in this big printers that we have." And they, in IBM Bolivia, nobody knew anything about it. And it's like, what? We don't have anybody that does this. Why don't you find out and get a code and give it to the customer? So I did. I presented them to a proposal, and this is as a system engineer, nothing to do with
sure.
sales.
Yeah,
And it turns out that this big printer, you probably heard about them when you're printing days. It was an IBM. 3900, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. And big laser printer, and I don't know, it sold, and it was like, $600,000. So it was a big sale for IBM, especially
Wow.
for
Wow.
IBM Bolivia. And I did it without even being a salesperson.
Yeah.
And 6 months later, other customers heard about it, that printer, and they wanted a big one that it was also a laser color printer, and they wanted to do books, and they somebody shows up in IBM and talks to me because I was the printing expert back then. I was like, here comes the second printer. This is more expensive, and
Oh.
so as a systems engineer, I had two of the biggest sales for the year for IBM, and it's like so this general manager took notice and he goes, I'm gonna put you in sales.
Oh.
You're doing great in this. I have no complaints, but in IBM we definitely want those sales, and they put me in sales. I started as a what would they call it, a hardware support engineer, kind of doing the sales, but after a little bit, I was put as a customer representative, which
Okay.
you're the main contact with customers, and they talk to you about everything. And of course, because I was starting, and here's where the story comes in. I'm sorry, I took a little bit there introducing or getting to it, but
You're fine.
yeah, it, you know, they first assign you the worst customers, right?
Now, what does that mean? The worst customers.
Yeah, I should say customers that haven't bought from IBM
Oh, okay.
in, or never, or they're customers that are the competition,
Sure.
or we know the customers there. We know they have a chance that they definitely buy technology, but they haven't bought it from IBM.
The challenging customers.
Yeah, so customers for the competition and not for us. So I did get this big bank, which was a big a financial institution in Bolivia, one of the bigger
Mhm.
ones there, but it was never an IBM customer. And
Okay.
and and that's how when you first start, you get assigned those customers, of course, until you prove yourself, right?
Sure.
And here comes a year and a half, and I heard that this big customer was looking to replace their main system, which included both hardware and software.
Hardware and software, but also they needed a printer, right?
They, I don't think we sold them a printer, but
Oh, that's
yeah,
just $600,000 down
I
the drain
know.
there, Hugo.
Yeah, I
Oh,
know.
okay.
Not that one. But anyhow, we did some presentations. I got to get people in there talking about the IBM Power servers. And here's where the link to IBM Rochester comes in, and of course we provided them with a proposal with power servers and all the it was a cluster of servers and storage and all this stuff that comes with it, and we fought really hard for that opportunity. And turns out that after a while we won it. IBM won this opportunity, this big banking new customer. It was I think 1.4 million. It was a lot of money, and
Yeah.
especially it was money that didn't go to a competitor. So it was a really good thing.
Yeah.
Celebrations, we did great, and customer placed the order. About 6 months probably after that, of course we received the equipment. They install it, they were testing it, they had to migrate their current banking system, so it wasn't something that was right away.
Sure.
But let's say about 6 months later, we hear back from the customer saying, hey, we're planning on going live next week, and we want you guys to be informed, heads up, this is what we're going to be doing, and be prepared just in case. They hadn't had any problems with the servers at all, but be prepared, we're doing this. Here comes Monday, customer switches to the new system, turn it on, everything is working fine. um, you know, uh, Hear back from the customer saying, everything's good. Transactions were, optimal. Everything's working fine. This is great. Here comes Tuesday. We get a call from the customer saying the server crashed at
Oh,
11 a.m. in the morning. This is our busiest time of the day. It crashed in the middle of everything. And of course, we want answers. And it's like, oops. So let's get people, in there. I wasn't a software engineer back then already anymore. So they went, they started looking, they started collecting data. Of course, we opened up a case with Rochester. People asked for debugging data and things we sent, and we're still investigating. Meantime, the server did come back up immediately. So it was, an outage of,
Okay.
not very long. They just restarted the server and everything was working fine.
Okay.
Here comes a couple of more days and everything's working fine, and that server crashes again.
Oh,
And of course, sentiment in the customers is rising. There's, what's going on here. As soon as we have people in there, the thing's crashing, and this is not good. Of course, we, back then we had, yeah, and I think we still do those critical situations. The crit state, it became this severity one
sure.
crit state. Everybody was involved, and I'm not gonna make it that long, but I think it was one more crash, and until we, one of the developers in here from Rochester goes, you know what? All the data that we're collecting, everything that we have, looks to us that someone is using the delay power off option. It looks like somebody is actually using the power switch in front of the server to turn it off while we're active and working.
Yeah.
And
Hugo,
yeah,
wait. Does this story involve a video
yes,
camera?
it does.
This is the story.
What?
Alex, this is the story I wanted to tell that I heard, and I wanted to name this episode. If we use this story, I wanted to name the episode End Job Abnormal. Hugo, please keep telling this story. I
All
can't
right.
believe that you know this story. Oh, this is awesome.
Okay. Well, then, so the developer kind of mentions that it kind of looks to us that someone is turning off the server while we're functioning, and they're doing a delay power off, and that
Yeah.
that came back to us, and I remember that the general manager for IBM Believe, and I, asked for a meeting with the president of the bank, and we said our developers think somebody is turning off the server, and we recommend that you keep an eye. And immediately he says we're going to put a camera on the server room. And 2 days, and they did this at night, put the camera without anybody
Okay.
knowing. 2 days later, or something like that, that server went down again. They went back and reviewed the data in the camera, and they found that the system administrator, the guy that was the administrator for the previous system, which was of course administrator for the new system now, was getting to the
Mhm.
front panel and turning off the server while it was working. He was always opposed to IBM winning the getting in there. He was for the other, I guess, for the competition, and because they didn't
Sure.
pick them, they wanted to make the IBM servers look bad by crashing them forcefully during the day,
Yeah.
and of course he was doing that. They caught him. Police was involved. Of course, immediately they fired him. But there was, they took him to court, and I don't remember what the outcome was. But yeah, he did confess to what he was doing, and he, of course, he had done it the two previous or three previous times. So it brings us, the ingenuity that that our developers have, and they said, they recognize this as something that was done by somebody and not
Right.
by the servers not being there. We actually got a better relationship with the customer after we told them that, because they trusted us a lot more after that.
And hopefully the system ran fine after they stopped flipping the switch.
Never had problems anymore.
I heard this story from a guy that used to work here named Mike Chasko.
Okay.
And the other part of that story was that a few months later, another customer called in with a similar issue, that the system was randomly powering off, and that Mike or somebody from that team overheard someone discussing this, went over and grabbed the phone from the guy who was talking to this customer and said the name of that previous guy and said, "Hey, does so and so work there?" And the person said, "Yeah, we hired him last month."
It's funny that you've heard of this story, and this was a long time ago, but it's a real story, and it highlights that the fact that security, and this is where I kind of wanted to bring it up to point. It's not just the keep your password safe, but you definitely need security. Um, secure your server room, which is important.
Yeah, physical
Yeah, that
security.
falls under security, and it falls under that area that we're under.
But Hugo, what took you away from sales back to tech support? I mean, isn't the commission that you get from sales more
It
remunerative?
is. It definitely is. IBM had plans to uh, to change their go-to-market strategy in a lot of the South American countries. So they were no longer have an office with an IBM or organization in it and relying on business partners. We had to go look for other opportunities around there, and
Okay.
a business partner of IBM in Central America kind of got word of this, and they offered me a job in Guatemala, and that's where we made our second move to go to live in Guatemala for about a couple
Oh,
of years or 3 years in there. It's not the same as IBM, so I always wanted to first come back to the technology side of it. I wanted to come back to the role of supports engineer and not sales as much. Even though I was very successful with it, and I did enjoy it.
I'm sure your communication skills that you developed, well, maybe you had those skills before you were in sales, but you have to have awesome communication skills in
Right.
sales. And I'm sure your current customers appreciate that when you're trying to explain a difficult topic to
Yeah, I
them.
hope they do. Yeah, definitely come in handy.
Alex, did you ever work in sales? Have a sales job, Alex?
I have not. No, I've been in support the whole time, and sometimes I wonder what it would be like to work in any other area doing anything else. And I'm a little bit jealous of Hugo's varied experiences.
I don't mean at IBM. I used to be a door to door salesman for uh, water treatment
Okay.
systems. And I would
Hmm.
go door to door selling. I'm not going to name the place, but it's a very large water purification
Hmm.
company in the United States. I was very bad at that
Right.
job. I like to consider myself I can talk to people, but I was horrible at that
Yeah.
job. So I knew after that I never wanted to work in sales because I just couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Part of me wishes I'd tried it at some point, but I'd never have, and I don't think I ever
Yeah,
will.
technology sales with IBM is different than other areas. You really like it's a really nice place to work. It was. I don't, I'm sure it still
Hmm.
is, but yeah, selling
Yeah.
for IBM is it's a nice experience to have.
So Hugo, just to kind of come around, circle back to something, with this customer that this particular user,
Hmm.
right, ended his own job, his actual job, abnormally.
Yeah.
Um, Alex and I have been talking a lot recently about the end job abnormal command. And specifically, I know we reached out to you last year at one
Hmm.
point before the podcast was even a
Right.
thing to talk about, how do you kind of recommend running this? Because you're just a total leader when it comes to
Mm.
work management and jobs and things
Yeah.
like that. And what's your experience with that? Because we do have a lot of customers that know about this command, that run this
Right.
command, and kind of get themselves into
They can.
trouble.
Yes, you're right. Let's talk about the Java normal command. Before we can, though, we have to talk about what end job does, or what we call the end of job processing. And this
Okay.
happens to every single job in the system, right? A job gets started, it creates some temporary structures, it creates, its library information, it opens things, and it runs, and when it's done, all jobs in the system are gonna end, right? This
Sure.
end of job process that we go, it's important that we understand what happens there. And then we can talk about what the end job abnormal does or actually doesn't do, and why its use is probably not it's not something that you should take lightly. You should definitely consider before using it. But
Okay.
when a job ends or this termination phase starts, the system has the task to clean up everything the job has done when it started and it ran and it worked. So a lot of things like we
Okay.
close database files if we have any database files open. We close other types of files, display files or data queues or any other object that we had been using during this life cycle of this job. All of those are closed, and those resources
Okay.
are released because we're going to have certain types of logs against this object, right? We're going to put a log on a database file so that we can update it or change it or do anything with it. We need to release those logs, well, so that somebody else can use them.
Okay. And these could be both shared and
Correct.
exclusive
Correct.
locks on
Yes,
objects.
correct.
Okay.
And a lot of the things that we're doing here are either to both share resources or to resources for which the job has, it's the only one that has access to. For example, library
Okay.
QTemp. QTemp library is something that we create for every job. It's its own individual library. It's a temporary library, but it contains objects that are, permanent in nature, meaning that they are there,
Okay.
they exist, they're clean, but they still occupy space and they're there, right?
What do you mean that they're clean?
When this job completes, part of that end of job processing clears that QTemp library, right?
Gotcha. So they're cleaned up.
Correct, they are.
Sure. Well, so but you said that each job has its
Correct.
own kind of.
Its own QTemp library. Nobody can see anybody else's QTemp.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that.
You can't look into somebody else's QTemp. We can get some information from it by dumping or servicing a job, but in reality, every job has its own individual QTemp library that gets cleared when the job ends. A couple more things that happen when that job is ended. If that job is under commitment control, if we need to roll back any changes, we're going to do that. We're going to call a
Okay.
lot of our message handler to set things like message queues back to their default delivery methods. That way, they can be reused if needed. And we're going to produce a job log, right? That's when a job log gets produced. Remember that,
Hmm.
that message logging that we asked about, that all takes effect when that job is ending. That's when we copy the contents of
Sure.
that job message queue and we put it in a job log spool file. And so that happens during that end of job processing as well.
Okay. Yep.
We then clear that job message queue as well. The job message queue is known as the job log. That's where
Okay.
all of the messages are placed in a job. Um, and then they're cleared and put into a job log when we end. We do allow jobs to remain in the job log pending status. So that means that that job message queue can stay active if that job is set to do that.
That's through a job log server.
It can be through a job log server, it can be by the job itself, but yeah. Or,
Okay.
we can just say, hey, go ahead and end and don't produce one, keep it available out there. So that's what happens when a job ends normally. Even if it ends up normally with an error message or a function check or anything, we're still going to go through that termination phase.
Cleaning stuff up.
Here's where the end job and normal comes in. And here's where it's kind of, that's where we're saying don't use it. If somebody uses the end job and normal against this job, it's going to prevent this job, or it's not going to let this job do all of these things that I just talked about. So it's not going to release all those logs that we have. It's not going to produce those job logs that we have. It's not going to go through the cleanup process that we did. It's not going to clear up those message queues, release those logs that we have, release those resources
Yeah.
that we have. And that can definitely cause problems, right? One example that we see a lot, and we used to see a lot, is, for example, if I use an end job and normal against a save job, a job that was placing lots of locks on a lot of objects in the system, right? We place
Sure.
30,000 locks on 30,000 files so that we can, save them without anybody else touching them.
That would be part of if you're doing a save job and you're doing like a save while active. We would go out and we would have to get locks on all kinds of stuff, like
Right.
everything in a particular
Yep.
library, especially if you use the option to say, to save everything in a one library, kind of a checkpoint. And then we grab all the locks once we finally
Uh-huh.
have them, or we have 90%
Yep.
of them, and we've given up on 10% because we can't get locks
Right.
on those. Then at the one point, yeah, you might have 30,000
Yep.
locks, or at least a shared lock on all these objects.
And that's where if I use the end job abnormal and this job is not allowed to close or release those locks, well, they're going to be left, unlocked, right? And I know from working with Alex and his team that we sometimes see, hey, this object is locked, nobody can touch it. But when we do a work object lock on it or display, log status or use some of those APIs to display logs and IFS objects,
Sure.
they look like somebody still has a lock on it, and that's that job that ended up normally that never released locks on those, on those objects or resources, right? Um, the
Yeah.
problem now is that because we didn't let the job do it, we used that job abnormal command. Well, the only way to release those locks, as an example, is to IPL the system, right? And so just because we use the end job abnormal on one job, we now have to, IPL the entire system to be
Yeah.
able to use those those objects again. Um, so that's one of the possible scenarios where the job abnormal command is not something that you should have used. Um,
Well, and that will automatically set
yeah,
the abnormal IPL flag so that your next IPL will be abnormal. Alex has told me
yeah,
about that
yeah.
before.
So that's one of the things that we do every time you use the job abnormal. The system is gonna say, hey, by the way, you ended things up normally. We may have not released all those logs and all those resources are not clean. Like that Q temp still out there. Well, on that next IPL, let's clean it. So we're gonna mark that IPL as an abnormal so that the system goes into that IPL and is aware that we're going to be doing that extra cleaning, right? And we're going to call an additional set of programs while that IPL is coming up that do all that cleaning for jobs that ended abnormally.
Say I'm an administrator and I've got a job that wasn't giving me the output that I wanted, and so I attempted to end it. It does not end. What should I do instead of jumping to end job abnormal?
So first thing is never attempt to use, then the subsystem where that job is running under to make it end abruptly, meaning that, ending the substance is actually going to make things worse. That is that it's not going to force that job that's having trouble ending and any faster because you decided to end the subsystem which is running under. If the job is in trouble already, ending the subsystem is not going to make it that trouble go away. It's still going to have whatever it was affecting it in the first place, still going to affect it. But now you have a subsystem that is now in an end status as well, and it's not going to accept any new jobs. Never end the subsystem thinking that's going to help. It's what, if you can take out of this podcast, I said to do, don't, don't attempt to do that. It's not going to help.
We'll put that in this episode's description, Kurt.
The other thing is that you cannot use the end job abnormal command after you have waited 10 minutes since you issued the end job immediate. So you're still going to give him some time to do that.
Why do you have to wait 10
10
minutes?
minutes because the system says, well, let's do let's let that job call those invocation handlers, those processes that close things up. Let's see if that job can do it on its own. And because if we're not going to do that, we're definitely going to get can get ourselves in trouble, and we certainly will do that. So there's a time limit that we put out there before you can use it. But then you can use it and you're allowed to use it, right? As long as you have enough authority to the command, you're certainly going to be able to do it.
You mean to run njob abnormal if you actually want to?
So the thing is, and this is what we call, sometimes it may be hard for a customer to realize that, and they may have to open up a call with us because we have tools that we can look in the customer system to say, yeah, in
Mhm.
this case, hey, go ahead and use that njob abnormal command, and you're not gonna get in any more trouble than that because you're using it. And it should end
Sure.
the job because we see that this is what's happening with this job. This is what's preventing us from ending right now, and it's safe to use it. But in the same thing, we may say, hey, no, this is not a good idea to use the njob abnormal command because right now this job is, in a situation where data integrity could be, we could affect it. We could left things that are not stable, I think is what we call it, or unstable
Mm.
resources, I think is what our developers use. But it could leave this or the system in a state where we're not functioning. As a matter of fact, the other thing that it does is if we use the njob normal command and then you call IBM and you say, hey, tell me what was wrong with this job. Well, just because you use that njob normal command against the job, it may have changed the initial problem, the call stacks and things that this was job was hang on and couldn't end to something else. So now the collection of data is not correct because we used the end job abnormal and it's changed. So it's also one of those things that sure, maybe they want to, they're in a hurry, they don't want to waste, or open up a case and talk to us. But it's definitely something that they should do. If the job is doing it's under commitment control, it's doing a rollback, and job abnormal is not going to help, and it's actually going to make things worse.
And it's going to prevent root cause analysis.
Exactly.
So you recommend if people are in the situation, they not run njob abnormal. You recommend they run njob star immediate, wait 10 minutes, and then basically during that time, probably open up a ticket
Yeah, there you
to
go.
the IBMI Global Support
Yeah.
Center. Try to find someone that knows that
Hmm.
area. But here's one question I have that kind of is in this. So eventually, though, you may have to tell the customer, yeah, you know, one, probably want to collect service docs
Right.
before you do that. But then also, you may be telling the customer, well, yeah, it's safe to run end job normal at this
Hmm.
time.
Yes.
One thing I'm confused about is what's the difference between the way end job abnormal
Right.
works and how an IPL would work if somebody issued power down sys star delay, say 10 minutes or
Yeah.
something like that. What's the difference between how that
Yeah.
works and how end job
Yeah.
abnormal
So
works?
an end job abnormal, like we said, it's not going to go through any of those cleanups that processes job termination phase that a regular end job goes through, right? So none of those things that
Yep.
were open are going to get clean. Logs are going to be left unlocked. We're not going to produce a job log. We're not going to clean that queue temp. So that's just because we use that end job abnormal, and those need to be cleaned on an IPL.
What is an IPL doing if someone IPLs the system instead of running end job
Yeah,
abnormal? Yeah, I'm looking for what's that difference?
in actuality, there isn't. And that's something that we see sometimes when we have a job that is not ending, the customer doesn't do an end job of normal. They just say, I'm going to IPL the system right now, right? I'm going to force an IPL that's going to end the job. And it does. When that IPL runs into that issue, it's going to find out that there's a job out there that is in trouble. It's not ending.
Okay.
And I know that our developers thought about this because they got a couple of system values that affect how we're going to behave when that happens. And
Okay.
one of them is how long we wait before we abnormally end that job that it's not ending. Um, so we're going to put a timer out there. We're going to say, okay, job, I'm going to give you some time before I force an end to you, and we kick up that timer. By default is 900 seconds, 15 minutes, and we're gonna wait and see if that job ends. in a lot of cases because it wasn't ending before and you issued end job immediate a long time ago. It's not ending. When that time, when that time expires, we're gonna do the same that an end job abnormal does. We're gonna end that job abnormally, and
Okay.
and of course we're doing it as part of an IPL. That IPL again will be marked abnormal because we ended jobs abnormally. They're gonna show up in your history log as a job, ended up normally. We know this a lot of times when customers say, hey, we were unable to reach restricted state. We can go and take a look at the history log and see which jobs were ended abnormally by the system. And by then we can say, hey, the system had to end this job abnormally, which is the same that an end job abnormal would have done, or even more forceful. And it then the IPL again is where all that cleanup occurs. So it would occur even if you used the job abnormal or if you didn't, because we ended those jobs abnormally, we're still gonna do that abnormal cleanup that we have to go through during IPL.
Well, I feel a lot more knowledgeable about the IPL process and NJOB Abnormal now.
But we had some time to talk about it.
What are some things that you're working on these days that you're looking forward to more customers finding out about?
Yeah. So and I think this is already public. It's been publicly announced, but 7.6, you're right, is it's in beta now, and customers are using it. One of the big things here is, and this is a big change for everyone, is the ability for the system to do multi-factor authentication. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yes.
and that's gonna be part of the operating system. Doesn't require that you purchase any additional functions or products or LPPs or nothing like that.
It's not $600,000.
No, it's part of it, and the beauty of it is that it works without any communication between the client and the server. And I think that's one of the greatest things that this technology brings in, because both the server and the client are going to be able to come up with that same token, same number in your authenticator app that the server is going to come up, and there doesn't need to be any communication link active between that server and your phone.
But the clocks will have to be in sync, right?
That's the only thing that matters, is that we have both the client and the server have the same key, which of course you create when you create your profile for that, and then the times have to be in sync, right? And that's important, but we can do that. That's something that we know how to do. And yeah, and both the server and the client calculate that same token. And if you enter and it's the time synchronized, we don't need to talk to each other.
First time I saw something like that, somebody in the center was active and doing a little bit of day trading. And I can't remember if it was through E-Trade
Yeah,
or one of the other ones, but they had this special token that was, I think they had it on kind of like a clip that might have even been in their wallet or
yeah,
something, but they pulled it out and you could see it was like maybe kind of like a thick credit
yeah,
card. And they could see that number, that code on there would change about every 15 or 20
right.
seconds. And yeah, then that's how they were able to log in and do that two-factor authentication. This is probably back in like
Yeah,
2005 or
yeah,
something like that. So
Yeah, it's
really,
been around a while.
that's exciting that that's going to be coming to the IBMI. And hey, if we have customers that have trouble with that in the future, we're going to have you on again, man.
great.
Thanks for joining us, Hugo. Yeah, it was really interesting to hear your career history and that crazy story about the system getting turned off. And
And the next time you come up here, Alex will buy you a beer.
There you go.
Just absolutely great to have you on the podcast today. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us here on
you
Me
An IBMI.